So we are going to talk today about and continue our discussion about the colorblind constitution. And this is um, Seth George, Josh McGee, and Jennifer Owens Morrison. Jane wasn't able to join us. And so I think initially in our class discussion, we were kind of all over the place about whether or not the Constitution is colorblind, and then we kind of dove more into the judicial system as well. And I think the first question that we kind of want to talk about is is there a way to collectively move towards that society of having a judicial system that actually treats people equitably and is colorblind? Or do we already exist in that space and we just don't recognize it? What are your thoughts?
Hmm. I guess as a blanket, like foray into the question, I feel like I take a bit more of a pessimistic in the sense that I definitely don't think we exist in a colorblind space, and I don't know if in the kind of, I don't know, anthropological route that societies take, if it's possible to reach a place of like true color blindness just based on the foundation of our country, like the social foundation of our country. So, as a brief answer, I think no. I don't know if that's necessarily the thing we should look at as like, oh, our end goal should just be like, oh, we can just ignore it. Like it doesn't matter. Like race doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I think like it was said, there's such a systemic problem in our country, and it's really rooted. And when something's rooted, it stands tall for a long time. A tree is planted into the ground, and its roots are below the dirt, and it stands still for such a long time. And that's the analogy I would like to use for systemic racism. And so when systemic racism is just when it's rooted in our country, and even when you look at laws or when you look at the Constitution, when you look at these amendments, um, some things are put in place for specific racial groups to never go past where they are in the moment. Um, and even with diversity, like with what's going on with diversity of departments of um, equity and inclusion, equality and inclusion, DEI, um, even that's becoming like a problem with who we just elected in our office, who we reelected in our office.
Mhm.
So I think it does goes to show, we do have a systemic problem. And I think that now it's becoming even bigger of a problem than it was before.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and to further your analogy around roots, right? Rooted, a tree plants these roots the larger the tree grows, the deeper the roots grow generally. And I'm a gardener. So I know what it's like to try to dig something out that is rooted. Like they they don't just go grow straight down, they grow out, they entwine with other things. And I think that's a really, really powerful analogy to use is that the, the seed that was planted that grew into this tree of racism and just outright subjugation and oppression you can try cutting the branches off, pruning it, which is I think literally what we've tried to do, right? We prune it here and there, thinking that is gonna kind of take it take it back step by step. But what ends up happening when you do that is the tree really then grows even bigger, right? And instead of doing the work that is required to take something out, if you would cut the tree down and you don't get to the roots of it, grind the stump out, you know, literally dig out each root that is there, then the tree is gonna just keep growing. And I think that that's what's happened is that because we've allowed, I think about, so to make a really weird like connection, in Germany when the Nazis took over and came to power, and after they were defeated with World War II, Germany passed laws that it was literally illegal to have the swastika out, to have those kind of things. That didn't stop it
Hmm.
completely, right? Like there's still neo-Nazis and whatever, even in Germany, but they have outlawed specific Nazi parties, right? And then other things spring up, but people then can recognize that, oh, that's what that is over there springing up, right? Like that piece of root that's still in the soil that we didn't quite get all out because when we ground the stump out, we left this one little tentacle. It's easier to recognize, I think. And I think that's where we fell short as a society because it we wanted to still profit off of other people and profit off of Black people. And we didn't root out the colonialism, the imperialism. We didn't root out the racism. We just said, "Oh, we're going to prune it back by getting rid of slavery," right? And
Hmm.
and we emancipated people, sort of, right? We came up with other ways to like subjugate people and keep keep the line, like Josh, like you said, the laws only went this far, right? They stopped where they could have actually made an equitable society the way they were either written or interpreted or um, allowed to continue it or be put into place at the state level where depending on people's bent or people's, racism, prejudice, people's need, want, and requirements for profit on the backs of other people created another branch of this racism, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with like everything. Um, but also I thought about this too,
Yeah.
and like maybe a reason why we can't really get far from a colorblind society. Um, like there's so many other different problems.
Yeah.
It's color blindness, like
Yeah. I agree.
even there's almost like we can't even ignore color in our own racial groups.
Mm.
And that's even it goes so deep and like it honestly just needs to be like rooted out because there's colorism,
Oh yeah.
colorism in Black communities. So we can't even be colorblind in Black communities, neither. Like
So,
we can start with, amongst every racial group,
mhm.
but like we almost need to come to a fine conclusion
Yeah.
um with colorblindness in our society.
Yeah,
Look past someone's color.
yeah,
Like between Black people, we can't even look past someone's color.
right.
Um, and part of that, um, part of that mindset stems from lighter color being superior.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, and connected to that is assimilation, wanting to
Mm-hmm.
assimilate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Can I
yeah,
ask a question about that for just a second?
absolutely.
I'm obviously white,
Hmm.
but I'm married to a black man.
Hmm.
And um it's a very interesting um colorism is just I find it fascinating is not the right word, but just very like interesting because I
Hmm.
think it goes both ways on that spectrum, right?
Hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Um, because, my husband's fairly light-skinned, but he has been accused of because he's light-skinned, he's not and because he's been raised and worked around white people a lot, most of his life, he he's been accused of not being black enough, right? And where as there's also the individuals that are too black. So I feel like it's just this weird, it's just this weird situation, like you said, of within the group of trying to assimilate, trying to be, you know, black is beautiful, sitting in black power. I sit there and I think how is anyone even able to be
Hmm.
when that's where what you're always bumping up against on top of the white gaze, right? Like
Hmm.
it's just I can't fathom how much questioning of your own self happens in that space as a black person. I can't because and I keep going back to like with the paper we're working on right now. Um, how I mean, I don't as a white person, I don't my brain only because I try really hard to center myself around understanding what my whiteness gives me, but I don't without doing that, I don't walk through the day going, "Oh, I'm a white person." But I can imagine that for Black people, you're always being confronted with your Blackness, right? Like, and you're never just, and I don't know that anyone is ever able to be just in their personhood.
Absolutely. Um, to talk about like it's crazy because sometimes you go into a black space, you're not black enough. Sometimes you go into a white
Right.
space, you're too black.
Right.
So, and a lot of that that also relates to the identity issues that sometimes
Yeah,
um, biracial children have.
absolutely.
Going into a white space, you're too black, and then the
Hmm.
black you're too white, and that's when the identity problems happen. And as that connects to um, being colorblind in a society, I guess being colorblind is a little bit of a problem
Hmm.
because for the biracial child, how are you going to be able to see, their color?
Yeah.
You need to be able to see their color
Yeah.
because they're half of they have the best of both worlds. So, you know, you need to be able to understand that this child may never be able to fit in because while they have both sides a part of them, both sides feel like they're not enough
Mm.
of what they are
Yeah.
already. And then you can't be colorblind with a black child
No.
because this child, someone in our class actually gave an example of their grandfather being a slave
Yep.
and how that has a drastic effect on who she is.
Hmm.
Because if your grandfather's a slave, like just imagine the um financial like aspect
Yeah.
and how that plays into everything. And so that's the reason why even like that's also even the reason why there's ghettos.
Mhm.
It all connects. Like it all connects.
Like the
Aside
tree.
from aside from a lot of people, aside from a lot of black people coming from, ancestors who were enslaved, and some of them, their ancestors, some of the generations were close.
Yeah.
Like the girl in our class,
Yeah.
whose grandfather was a slave. So some of the generations are not that far. My great grandmother, who just we just celebrated the life of her 102 years.
Oh,
You
good.
know, her her grandmother was and grandfather were slaves. So some people,
Yeah.
that was my great great great, but some people,
It's much closer than what we
it's much
realize.
closer. Yeah, it's much
Yeah.
closer, and so
Yeah.
it, it takes an effect, and even what I brought up about. I guess we can never be colorblind because there's still issues and problems,
Yeah.
and like I said, each generation has their own problem. You know, you had slavery, and um, then you had it be abolished. And the crazy part was that slavery was never abolished because of the fact that it's bad to enslave black people.
Right.
That wasn't the reason.
No.
Abraham Lincoln didn't abolish slavery because he thought slavery was bad.
Mm-mm.
He didn't abolish it because you know black people shouldn't be enslaved. That's not the reason why he abolished it. And so, and we all know that,
Yeah.
but um, we can never be colorblind when we've come so far. We can acknowledge we've come so far from slavery. We've come so far from segregation, but there's still segregated areas in every state. And part of that is the redlining, you know?
Mhm.
This is why we still have predominance in schools of white children or black children. And that stems from, we had the housing discrimination and property discrimination, redlining, gentrification. And um, These property owners they're biased. So it's giving people who are in those lower income brackets, who are of color or who are black, a harder time. So you need to see the black person's at this point, you need to see the black person's color to understand the biases towards them. And so like I guess I can see why we do need to have a colorblind. I can see why we do need to have a colorblind society because really we should be paying attention to the content of people's character, not the color of their skin, like Dr. Martin Luther King said. But we don't do it anyways. We
Yeah.
don't do it anyways because not everyone's the same.
No.
Hmm. I wonder if we talk about like the colorblind. A lot of people kind of speak to that as this like the lofty ideal, like idyllic society that we could reach. But you're right, and it seems like at this point we've cultivated a country that is, it just is racist. Like it's no longer a concept that exists purely out of the participation of racist people. Like the space is racist, like the norms and, for I think for a lot of people, even subconscious norms and standards by which we behave and stuff are racist. So you ignore color and everyone decides, okay, we're colorblind now. I don't see you as a black person. I see you as a person. The space we've created a racist space. It will do it for us. Like there's too many guardrails and guidelines that have been created that enforce a racist regime because that's what the country is. It's a racist regime. So it seems like colorblind is honestly in that like kind of layman's approach where it's just in order to be a colorblind society, we have to ignore color starting now. Seems like it might be like one of the most harmful things we could do because then it's just a reset to like, like, oh, I'm not racist, so that must mean what's happening, all these racial divides are they must be naturally justified or something, or there must be a reason outside of racism. So it's actually your fault that this is happening,
Yeah.
not the fault of racism. So it seems like I wonder if at this point, being in a racist space that has been constructed the way that it has, the only way to sort of colorblind affect would actually be a kind of, I guess, a state of constant awareness, like a necessity of like constant awareness and constant rumination um, on I don't know, on the state of being, on what it means to be black, on what it means to be white, and how those things interact. So yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like color blindness is actually like a really harmful idea in America as it is because
Yeah.
it requires a blank slate and we can't have a blank slate.
No. I agree with that. And someone I think in the class said something about we're always thinking about if we're always thinking about race, then we're always basically racist. Or at least that's kind of how I took it, which could be completely
Yeah,
wrong, right? But I was kind of like, but no. Like I feel like it's in how you
yeah,
interact.
I agree. I think that's kind of like, honestly, I think that's a ridiculous thing to say. It's like
I know.
saying,
It was just the weirdest it was the weirdest
yeah,
comment and maybe like I said, maybe I interpreted it completely incorrectly. Um
I don't, I don't think so. I feel like I hear that sentiment pretty often.
yeah.
Unfortunately, because I think it's an easy deflection to
Yes.
make. I think that's like saying, if you're always like, you're a philosopher who studies ethics and morals, like you're just gonna behave like a psychopath all the time. Like how can you say that's true?
Right. And or you're going to be completely supremely ethical, right? Like
Yeah, like
no, you're human and whatever's going to happen is going to happen because you have to
yeah.
make decisions in the moment, like,
Mhm.
and think through your actions, right? Like, it's almost like negating your accountability, I think, of how and negating the society's
Hmm.
accountability. Because, well, if we keep talking about this, it's just gonna always be at the forefront. Well,
I think,
no, because I think because there is pieces, and this kind of gets to the next question. How does the push for removal of affirmative action help or hinder the colorblind constitution? Um, if we're put in affirmative action, meaning like the DEI programs and
yeah.
going back to meritocracy instead, which is such utter ridiculousness. Like I'm trying to hold my tongue.
Mm,
Because basically it's when I interpret that, what that tells me is that white people think that they have the corner market on all of the things. They are the best of the best of the best, no matter what. And what affirmative action actually did was put unqualified people, I mean, that's the argument, right? Unqualified people in spaces that they shouldn't be. And that's really what it comes down to, is it's in spaces that they shouldn't be.
mm,
And what it really is leading to is, and what we see is meritocracy for white people is mediocrity,
mm,
because they don't have to work harder. They don't have to, we as white people don't have to work harder. We don't have to put in work. We automatically should be there because it's our space, right? I think that's really what is ingrained in all of that conversation. And by repealing all of these prunings that we did to the tree of racism,
mm,
going back to that analogy, right? By repealing all of those, and like, so when you prune a tree, sometimes if you don't want it to grow again, you put this growth stuff on it, right? Like that stops the growth. Well, we decided we might have put a little bit of that growth stuff on there, but now we cutting that off so that the tree can continue to grow, so that the racism can come back even stronger.
mm,
So that's kind of what I see, this push for removal of DEI and affirmative action, and it completely hinders any kind of forward progress, right? It's actually we're going way backwards. Um, and I don't see it ending there, but I also see it shifting to not just Black people and people of color. I see it shifting to a complete warfare on class, which is a whole different
mm,
conversation, right?
yeah.
But that's what I see. And I completely agree that when we erase people's color by saying we're colorblind, it takes away everyone's experience.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. I think, um, yeah, taking away DI departments as though, those were the problems. And it's like, oh, it's this overemphasis on race. I think this is the colorblind approach.
Yeah.
Like that's colorblindness
Yeah.
in practice. Um, and I think we're in kind of an interesting place with how racism functions maybe. And you know, this is going to be kind of just me conjecturing, but I think um, I think there's a certain strategy to effective racism because that's what it is. It's a construction. Like I think
Mhm.
part of the problem with why the colorblind ideal is so appealing to some people is because I think America historically has done a good job at convincing people like, you know, we shrug our shoulders collectively and are like, damn, slavery, that was messed up, right? Like hate that that had to happen. Like sucks that slavery was a natural thing that just it's just something all people do when it's not. Like I
Mm.
don't think, you know, racism isn't just a this natural conclusion that humanity inevitably reaches everywhere in the world. Like it was designed and created, I think, pretty deliberately and pretty mindfully. Um, but I think, yeah, we've done a good job historically trying to tell people that it's just it was a bad thing that happened. Uh, and you know, we just need to move on. Like it was a bad thing that happened. It happens to everybody. And there's no work that we need to do or people we need to hold accountable. It's just something we have to move on from, which isn't true.
Right. So I think we're hitting our time limit. Is there any final thoughts that we want to wrap up with, Josh? Do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, final thoughts. I would just say like living in a colorblind society, like it's never okay being blind. Like it's never okay being blind. Blind is being blind of anything means that you are disabled. You can't see. So being colorblind
Really
is
good
another thing.
point.
That's a
You
Sorry.
know,
bummer.
being blind from anything isn't good, you know?
Yeah.
Damn,
So,
that's
with certain things like this is like because people like to create words. People like to create words like the creator of colorblind, I don't know who they are, but they created it for good. Like
Yeah,
it's twisted.
it
Like
is.
if you think about it, it's twisted because you created this word for good intention, but but it's also kind of microaggressive
Yeah.
because being blind is never good. Being
No.
blind is never good. So colorblind is not good. You're supposed to see. You're supposed to see someone's color in order to understand where they're coming from or to understand their experiences. Because what you're experiencing is not going to be what someone else is experiencing. And what someone else is experiencing, they're experiencing it because of the systemic problem in our country.
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say.
That was
Being blind is never
beautiful.
good.
Yeah,
That
we
was
got to save that
beautiful.
for class.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
The message is being blind is never good.